Good evening, beautiful people. I'm delighted to welcome you to our today's Ask Us Anything panel, for which I have been able to recruit members from every role in a development team who you can ask absolutely any questions you like about accessibility. So don't be shy. Ask any question that that has always been burning in your mind. You can address your questions to a specific person or simply ask the whole group, and one or more of them will answer you. It doesn't matter. And the same applies to the panelists. If I ask someone a question and someone else has something to add, or perhaps a question on their own, please feel free to ask it. The aim of this whole Ask Us Anything is to have a conversation and discussion, and not just simple question and answer session. But first, I would like to briefly introduce all the panelists so that you attendees know who you are dealing with. So first would be Emma. A warm welcome to Emma. She's a front-end developer and accessibility specialist. She worked for the past years with one of the Europe's largest e-commerce to improve their accessibility. And she is also CPWA certified, meaning she passed both the CPAC from IWAP, it's for core competence of accessibility, as well as the WAS for web accessibility specialist exam, which not so many people have on this planet. Next would be Daniel. He works as a product owner with focus on process automation in the bank industry. He started his career in a regtech startup in processing and calculating taxes for cryptocurrencies. And after that, he worked as an IT and project management consultant in the public sector for the social insurance and the Ministry of Finance. And the last issue he faced with accessibility was to cover the European Accessibility Act in the consumer processes in the banking industry. Laura is a UX researcher specializing in assistive devices for low vision. As a self-taught UX UI designer, Laura specialized in web accessibility from the very beginning. Understanding where accessibility issues in the code come from was her motivation to start learning web development. And a fun fact about her is that her accessibility blogger career started with trash cans. Another panelist I'm happy to welcome tonight is Nao. She is from Japan and used to work in a large bank in Japan, but dived into the world of programming in Spain. Because her cousin has congenital hearing loss, Nao feels a personal connection to accessibility and the challenges faced by people with disabilities. Now she's working as a QA tester, but learning about accessibility like the participants here. Last but not least, I hope she is joined. In the meanwhile, we would have Mercy. Her career journey began as a software developer, but her fascination with user experience quickly led her towards UX design and research. And she previously did an internship at Microsoft in product design and research. So I don't know how the audience feels, but for me, it's important to find out where the problem lies in implementing accessibility. And I hope that this panel discussion will perhaps provide a little more clarity on where things can be done and need to be changed in a development team and the whole project lifecycle in order to achieve a more accessible result. For example, when creating websites, applications, and other products. So I would like to start asking Nao how she deals with bugs that violate the WCAG criteria. First of all, how do you test it? Do you test out of curiosity, or does the project require you to? And it would also be interesting for me to know why you think these bugs make it to you as a tester in the first place and are not catch already by the developer.
Oh, okay. How do I test accessibility? Is like first I have to understand the WCAG, the guideline And like in Japan, there is local law adapted WCAG guideline like that, and other guideline too. I have to learn. And then later, I used automated testing and manual testing. And automated testing, I color contrast ratios or WebIMS contrast checkers to check the color contrast, or alt text, the typical bug, and area rows and keyboard. And the keyboard tabability, tab accessibility that you mentioned in other sessions I use, and sometimes it happens back. It says it's all okay, but when I use a tab and it goes to the different site, then I use automated texting, but I have to check in manual texting time too.
Yeah.
And for example, empty headings. Some developers use empty headings and later link, but it all happens. But the tool say it's okay, but no, or it says no, but it's okay. It is called false positives and false negatives. I have to see the examples, knowing examples like that.
Yep.
And I have to check all. Finally, I have to use manual texting.
Yeah, sure. And do you, is this a part of your job, or is it something you do out of curiosity?
No. The company requires me to do that.
Okay.
Because if I say that I want to implement accessibility in this application, nobody says no, or they don't know how. It doesn't need. Some says that this application isn't for disability persons.
Okay.
Then I can't go forward.
Yeah. Okay. See, how do you feel about that? That these bugs reach you in the first place? Why do not developer develop such good code that you do not have to find these bugs in the first place?
So if the company decides that we have to implement accessibility because of the European laws, then they hear what I say.
Okay. So you, the developers are not not that familiar with accessibility, and you are the one familiar.
So that's it. So I have to help or advice or something. Here, let me check. I like texting and giving the ticket of Jira. I always paste the WCAG number.
Okay. So very detailed.
Links. And sometimes recall the screen readers también too.
Okay, wow, this is great. So in your case, it seems like that you are the one with the knowledge about accessibility, and through your tickets, where you provide lots of information about what is wrong and what developers can improve. Now they can learn about it and make the code better. It seems in your project or in your specific case.
Of course, all of the designers and developers are learning too. But mostly they are focused on the function.
Okay.
Vision. How usability, right?
I see.
Yeah, I see. Then there is some holes that they can't fill. So I help.
Yeah, interesting. interesting that in your case that the tester, which is most likely the last stop for the development lifecycle, is the one with the knowledge and shares it with the others, so it can be more accessible. It would be interesting that for MX, for example, since you're a developer, how does it work in your case when you're on a project? Is your code already tested by you, that you are mostly sure it is accessible before it reaches the testing phase? How would you say it, or how is it the life cycle in your projects you're working on?
Yeah, I think it can also depend on like whether you have quality assurance as part of the life cycle as well. Because I've worked on projects where the developer is kind of responsible for everything, and then other projects where you have testers. So it can be a different kind of balance depending on what kind of team you work on. But personally, myself, I try to test as much as possible before I even like pass my code to the next stage. But I know that I'm probably in the minority there at the moment. I try to like the last project that I worked on, we were actually a team of 6 developers on the accessibility team that were like improving the design system. So we always tested with both screenreader and keyboard before we made like production releases and that kind of thing. But then on previous projects, I've been the only developer on the team that has any accessibility knowledge. But yeah, it can try to get it into like the pipelines for the code, but I know that can also be difficult. We've had pushback before that even if we add accessibility testing into the pipelines, they don't want it to block release to production. So yeah, I think it is good to try and move it earlier in the cycle. So there's a lot that developers can do themselves. Like every time I make a component, I test with both screenreader and keyboard and run like an Axe Dev Tools check on it. But yeah, maybe there's not everybody that does that, unfortunately. So I can definitely see the need for the quality assurance as well.
Yeah, true. So since it's not explicitly part of your job as a developer, so it comes to the QA testing, and then we find these many bugs, which then affect the whole the life cycle, and it stops the project from moving forward. I would have a question to Daniel, because in your master's thesis on traditional project management and HR approach, you quoted from the study from the KPMG that only 26% of all IT projects are completed on time, while 28% of all projects are stopped and 46% exceed the planned costs and cannot meet their go live date or never achieve the required functional scope. In your opinion, could this be due to poor code quality? For me, just to make it clear, for me personally, code quality is very important, and I think it enhances the developer experience first, and also the code is clean, obviously, and sustainable, and above all, accessible in most cases. And I know that time and money are very important in project management, but if you put more effort into good code quality from the beginning, for example, through a good introduction to the project and accessible code and code bases for all developers, and maybe mandatory pull requests and regular testing, which may seem like a lot of work in the beginning, it would take less and less time over the course of the project, thanks to good communication and collaboration, and it would reduce the time that would otherwise be spent on bug fixing at the end, which would mean which would then make it impossible to meet the deadline, as it currently seems to be the case, right? What do you think about that?
Short answer, no. Because also in the studies, but also in my experience for the last 6 to 7 years working with these whole topics, it's I mean, it's not a topic of accessibility. It's also not a topic about, in general, how fast or not fast the developer develops the code and the test and so on. It starts right in the beginning. It's about what does the customer really need or like to have. It all starts with the requirements in the end, and then in general the overall scope. Because so the customer comes and says, yeah, okay, I want to have this and that application with that and that functionality. Okay, perfect, good. But then when you go into the details and you say, okay, what exactly do you need, and here and that, and let's discuss it and so on, then there are so many questions the customer in the first place haven't thought about it, and also don't know the answer in the end, and also need to discuss it and align with other people and so on, and also see often some huge dependencies to other applications or regulations and so on, which make it quite hard then to stick to the timeline in the beginning, and also to the budget in the beginning. And I've also clearly stated out in the studies that in the end, then you have the situation that either you run out of the budget, or in the end, and that's most likely the case, you reduce the scope to ship the product in a minimum stage in the end, and not the whole functionality. I mean, so for a short answer with the accessibility topic, I would say no, but I can also refer to the other speakers because of the topic with the accessibility, and you ask the question regarding the if also the developers, for example, have implemented in an accessible way. And here I want to say that, so for example, from my experience, okay, most of the projects were backend projects and not consumer-facing products with front-end applications. But in my opinion, and also discussed with some developers, the accessibility topic in the end, first of all, it's not aware. They're not aware that this is or could be important, let's say it that way. And then there's also a lack of knowledge that they've never heard it at university or through the whole life in the end. And then, because you mentioned it in the introduction, so the last big topic with accessibility, and also my first touch point with accessibility in this situation, was the European Accessibility Act beginning with 1st of July. And then it was we need to do something with accessibility. What's that? What should we do now? And there's a deadline from the regulator, so we have to do it, and we need to prioritize it. And so it's not so let's do it when we have time for that. So we need to do it. And this was then quite hard because, as I said, lack of knowledge. People or the leadership also were not aware in the end, and therefore it was a tough timeline to meet the deadline. And then in the end, our application were exactly at the deadline, faced the whole regulation of the Accessibility Act, but not before, because before there was no need in the end.
Yeah, that's already a problem. Yeah, the problem is indeed that developers do not learn or know about it during university, and that's why they can't even write the simple HTML, unfortunately. But I would see lots of it could change many things about accessibility if people could learn it from the very beginning and understand it, so they would not make simple mistakes like the button link mistakes we see again and again, or also like heading structure, because these are very simple things we could change which would never be. There shouldn't be a possibility to even implement it like this if you know it, and this could also save lots of money in the end. Time, and then also money. But yeah, in the beginning it would be time which we could save when we do not have to do this with the bug fixing phase. Thanks for this. Then I would have a question to Laura, which I personally think it's very interesting for me to know. You often, so the question is always later on. I I talk much before it, and then the actual question comes. You often work directly with people with disabilities, in your case with visual impairments or low vision, and now you yourself have the knowledge of reading and understanding code. It's getting better and better, and you also often test with screen readers yourself. I would be interested to know, now with this knowledge from both sides, when doing user research and talk to the people directly using screen reader every day, and now you also use screen reader for testing, how do you evaluate your testing results, given that you have enough experience? Do you always come to the same conclusion, or was there a time where you thought, okay, this code or this element is a huge disaster, you cannot understand anything, but then the user using screen reader every day says, okay, no, that's actually not a problem, because we skip it or they do not pay that much attention? Then we as developers who only use screen reader testing from our perspective and we do not rely on, do you see there any differences?
Like classic UX answer first, like it depends on the user, but yes, there are stark differences in practice, especially when I started using screen reader testing. It was just very overwhelming. I feel like for everyone who isn't used to using a screen reader, there's like this panic moment when you first try it out and oh my god, everything starts talking to me suddenly. It's just a lot at once, a bit intimidating. And I think you have to realize that it is, for most users, it is the same experience at first, because the very, very low minority of people are actually born blind. I think it's like roughly 3%, maybe. But most people actually start with normal vision or are born with lower vision, but like nothing that would qualify as legally blind already. And in most cases, it just degenerates the vision over time. So the older you get, the worse your vision usually gets. But the exact time frame will depend on your lifestyle, your genetics, everything. So many factors. Looking at like the overall demographic, most people that go blind are way older. So you have, on the one hand, the challenge that they are already in their 50s, 60s, so they're not digital natives, and they already have like those entry barriers towards adapting new technologies. I think on the one side it is being part that they're not like digital natives, but on the other side I think it's also because after you've lived your life for like 50 years with your same routines, with just you have set it up in a way that you feel comfortable, and you're suddenly forced, or not suddenly, but gradually forced to switch up your routines, to adapt new things to help you get around. People can be very resistant to that. They usually like to preserve their lifestyle, and it's this mindset of, I've been doing this my whole life this way, I'm not going to change it now that I'm 60. And just like in all aspects of life, I think. But with screen readers and with disability tools in general, that can be a barrier, because people kind of gatekeep themselves out of using assistive technology that would benefit them because they don't want to try it, because it's just not nothing they imagine themselves seeing. Coming back to the screen reader testing, so I went a bit on a tangent there. I think if you're a developer using a screen reader for testing, you already have higher standards for the usability you want to achieve with it compared to, I would say, the average user. Because unfortunately, our web landscape is pretty shitty when it comes to screen reader accessibility, like overall. So people are usually already happy if they can navigate it somehow. I just talked to a colleague today about Google Maps accessibility and how it behaves when you use it with the screen completely off and just screen reader. And then it just tends to read out everything. Like everything first, all the image descriptions, all the boutiques around you, everything before it actually goes to, okay, this is the route. And usually if you're out navigating, you want the route first. This is like why you're opening the app. So most of the time, adept screen reader users are already kind of used or kind of expecting that it will take them some time to get through all the links in the menu. So they are happy if something actually works. But if we're going back to the newer screen reader users, so I'm thinking like people, let's imagine like a user in 53 years old, just had cataract surgery, because that surgery in particular tends to replace your lens so you can see well in the distance again, but not so well anything that is very narrow to you. And this is often kind of a life event where you very suddenly have to switch over to a screen reader because you pick up your phone after you wake up from the surgery and you can't read it anymore, which is also kind of like just shocking. Those are actually the kind of users you have to think about when you do screen reader testing, because those are, I would say, the most vulnerable ones, in the sense that it's independent of how well they are adept to using technology, but the screen reader will be a new technology for them. And just the way that you're starting screen reader testing, you're both in the same boat here. It is just overwhelming. It is confusing to get around. So I think that is like the lowest common denominator to think of. Because for people who have been using screen readers most of their lives already, let's say like 10 years plus, they have a lot higher pain tolerance or like error tolerance, and they have a way higher stamina. So they will try keeping up, they swipe around, they explore more of your web page, because time has proven if you just hang around, stick around, and don't give up, you're more likely to get to where you need to go. But for the newer users, it is really a matter of self-confidence, and if they don't know how they will get around, if they will find it, they might as well just close their laptop or close the app and try to call the business.
So from your perspective, you would say that the average developer who is using a screen reader for testing and guessing, okay, it's okay, the screen reader user will understand it, I hope, it's not enough. It isn't very important to talk to screen reader users who are relying on the screen reader and make the product accessible as possible for them.
Yes, I think it's actually very, very helpful if you can see how people navigate. And again, just always keep in mind, like, not everyone has the same habits in navigating the screen readers, but if you have like a reference point of one user, it does help you kind of form a mental image of, okay, this is what I have to look out for, and this is how some users would do it. Because even if you try to imagine it, like, trying to empathize with the lived experience is still not the lived experience. That's also something in the UX space that we have to constantly keep in mind, because we talk a lot about emphasizing with users. But the part with disabilities is there's just like a limit to empathizing, and then there's a stark cut, and the lived experience just continues. So there's so much more. It is also an issue in user research in particular, because you can emphasize a certain part, but you can never know what it is like to live with a disability. And because of this, you never know what the people aren't telling you.
Yeah. I do have a question from the audience for you. Which platform, if any, do you use for usability testing with persons with disabilities? Which approach do you recommend for smaller teams that can't afford Fable? I guess Fable is a platform.
Yes, Fable is like, it's mostly software-based testing platform, if I remember correctly. I haven't used it yet myself, and we currently don't use usability testing platforms because we are mostly like hardware, so you kind of have to hand the device to someone, have them try it out. But what I would recommend is that you get in touch with local DPOs, so disabled persons organizations. It can be a bit tricky at first because DPOs don't just like give out people they represent, like on a whim. They are very protective of their members usually, which is the correct way to go about this. And if they don't see a big benefit in the thing you're developing, then they don't really bother like connecting you with people. Like they don't want to waste people's time. But if there is a benefit in what you're doing for the people, not just for the company, most of the time you can talk to them and figure something out, set up a usability testing session. It might take you a while. It might take some time just to build a relationship that the disabled persons organizations are convinced you are not just here to make some money based off of disabled people, but actually to help them and improve their lives in the end. But in general, I would always recommend getting in touch with the local disability organizations because they are everywhere. I've noticed it depends on the country what they are called. So there are vastly different ones. For example, in Austria, we have mostly NGOs and DPOs. But here in London, for example, I noticed that most is handled through charities. So it takes a bit of Googling to figure out like who is responsible for your region. But usually there will be definitely some results. Like everywhere, we have some organizations.
Okay, thank you. I would also have a question from the audience for everyone who feels interested in answering it or motivated to answer it. I'm working on making our library archives, currently mostly PDFs, images of historical documents, accessible to WCAG standards. Do you have recommendations for how to write alt text when you don't have a specific end user in mind or don't know how they will be using the document for the research? You can also find the question in the chat. If not, I can repost it if you can't see it from the beginning.
Yeah, I can jump in quickly. Like, I guess this just shows why you can't just have one alt text for an image and then expect to be able to use it anywhere on the web, because context is so important. But I do also understand that you need to have some sort of alternative text because you don't know what kind of context the user is using it in. In this case, then maybe like making sure that the most important information in the image is described, so that the user knows what is in the image. If there is any text at all in the image, that would need to also be described. But I think if the user at least had a description of what things are in the image, if they are using it for a different context, then maybe they can kind of piece together from the description, in that case, the information they're looking for. But yeah, I think it's a good example to show why you can't just have one alt text that works everywhere.
Does someone else have something to add to this question?
Maybe not so much input, but more an anecdote, because it reminded me of the reason why many people are limited in their choices for education and subsequently like the workforce. Because I remember a friend told me about when he considered what to study in university, his first choice would have been art history, actually, until he found out that you would need a cited guide or a cited assistance for any type of archive work. Because if you're blind, you could work with historic documents if you can scan them. Some of them you actually can't scan because they're too fragile. But if you're digitalizing them, then I hope that's fine. But in most cases, you will still need cited assistance to kind of figure them out and then also connect them to the context. I guess it will heavily depend on what kind of documents we're talking, because they're like historic records. It could be like ledgers, it could be like more art historic context. I think in the art historic context, it would be the hardest one, because that will be kind of hard to interpret if you're just here to digitalize it and not a fully fledged art historian yourself. But I mean, the obvious a recommendation would be to go with the alt text decision tree, just as like a base guideline. If it's like text-based, then that's probably making it easier. But for anything that has pictures, maybe that's just like a wild guess. You could get involved with the local university and see if they can make internships for the students out of it, that students from the respective majors actually write the texts for you, the kind of open source and crowdsourcing it. Just like a wild guess.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, hopefully this will be a good answer. And now I can currently not hear you.
Sorry. To make out text like the archive of old newspapers or something, then imitate the nuance of the title too. That sounds like this is an old document, and if the out is like title in that day, and then I think it's better to understand the nuance.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I hope this answers your question, or help you in any case. I also saw in the comments, in the chat, a comment/question from Marta, and I would like to address it to Daniel, kind of, because with the WCAG, yeah, we have this problem that some components are maybe WCAG fulfill the WCAG requirements, but make it not necessarily accessible for the wider audience. And the question would be, how do you prove to stakeholders that we need to change the component for a more accessible one, like change in the design system or change of the component in storybook or something else, and when it takes some time in a fully packed sprint?
I mean, in the end, from that perspective, I would, because you said to address the stakeholders, and especially for my stakeholders in the end, it's more about, okay, how much does it cost, and how much time does it take, and especially, is it really required, and it's a requirement from the regulator. We have to implement it in the end. So, and therefore I would play it exactly like that, because we don't want to pay any fines or some special fees, or get in trouble with the regulator and then end up in the media, for example. So therefore, to have it in a really accessible way, then I would play the regulator card. We need to implement it, so it takes a sprint. It can also take 2 sprints or 3 sprints, but we need to implement it, because otherwise we face really some difficulties and issues, and end up in a law case. And this is not the thing we want to end up in the end. So, and most of the time, especially for the regulation parts, as I said, I'm here in the banking industry, and before it was in the public sector, and okay, the public sector in general, but also the banking industry is a highly regulated industry, and these they know, okay, we need to implement this, because otherwise we face these issues. Also, you don't have the external regulator, let's say the regulator in the end, with the laws, but also some internal audits you need to address and to fix these issues, and therefore there is, when the audit flies into the office, then you know you have plenty of time to implement it, so it's no problem and no cost. You have endless money. So, so that's really the case. So, and then for new features, okay, it's then quite complicated. Do we really need this? Yeah, we need a cost-benefit analysis, and so on and so on. So, but for the regulation topics, it's quite hard, because otherwise, I mean, as I said in the beginning, so if there wouldn't be the let's say pain or the power of the regulator with these laws, I don't see there would be a need from, or nobody would address this topic in the end, especially also with the awareness and lack of knowledge. But also if there's a knowledge or the awareness in general, okay, this could be useful, but yeah, so therefore it's you need to play the regulator card, because otherwise you will not have accessible versions.
Emma, did you face something like this before in your projects?
All the other projects were not accessible in the end.
Yes, I think we quite often you want to go above and beyond. Like you don't want just to be like WCAG's great, but it is a baseline, and you can still do more. Like the person in the chat mentioned, just with disabled buttons is just one example. But quite often, especially recently with the push to become compliant before the deadline, I was finding like you get met with kind of like, yeah, that sounds great, but is it a requirement or is it a nice to have? So unfortunately, a lot of companies are still in that state of, okay, we'll do enough to get through the regulations and get through the auditing processes and that kind of thing. But there's still a long way to go for most companies to develop in their accessibility maturity levels to a place where they're ready to go beyond what the law requires. And that can be very frustrating as a developer or even as a designer that wants to do as much as possible to make things accessible. But yeah, you also can't burn yourself out on some of these things as well. So yeah, it's a balance.
Yeah. This would also be because of the European Accessibility Act a question to all of you. What challenges have you had while implementing accessibility for the deadline in June? If you had any of the projects you were working on at this time. Everyone is welcome to answer.
I can say on the project I was working with, we had also, it's a very big e-commerce site. It's available in several EU countries with a lot of small repositories and a very large design system. And our challenge there was that we had to make sure that the design system was still backwards compatible whilst also making it more accessible. But then we ran into challenges, for example, like we'll take the example of an icon button, for example, a button that only has an icon and no text in it. And we were like, great, we will just go in and in the design system, we will add an ARIA label so that everyone that uses this button now has to add their label, then it will be accessible. Problem was, it sounds simple in theory, but this icon button appears about, let's say, several thousand times across 10 to 15 different repositories across the whole of this e-commerce website. And if we make a change by adding a required ARIA label in the design system, we then have to find all of those thousands of versions of that button everywhere in all of these repositories before we can push anything to production. Otherwise, one of these buttons could take down the entire site. But then that meant that we couldn't make ARIA labels required for an icon on an icon button. We were only able to make it optional, which then means people don't have to add it, which means they can still add new icon buttons without labels. And so we were all the time grappling with like, how are we going to, I mean, at some point they are going to have to make these things required and just do like, okay, we're going to blitz these 10,000 icon buttons over the whole site. But you have to make compromises sometimes, which you don't always want to do. But we're like, okay, well, at least by allowing them to add an ARIA label, we're one step closer. and then you can make plans for
Mm.
making things even better in the future. But yeah, it's a lot of compromise, and sometimes you can't always, even though there's best practices, you can't always do it in the way you would like to. So like, I know like what first rule of ARIA is, don't use ARIA.
Yeah.
If they've already built some component in a kind of strange way, and then the only way you can fix it is to add a ton of ARIA to it, like you can't just rip it out and replace it with HTML, then yeah, you have to compromise in that case as well.
Yeah. I would have a question for the tester and UX researcher in our panelists. It would be, as a tester, for example, now, how important do you think it is for testers to understand code? Do you think it would improve the whole life cycle, so the code and also the team, how they are working, when testers also would know how the code is written and why it is written in a certain way, and they would understand?
In my case, normally I can't see the code. So the different repo, and when I ask, I can see, but only I'm testing in automating testing something, and I appear the tag error, then I figure out with developer tools.
Okay.
Here, there is something bad
Okay.
is happening, and write a ticket or ask the developers
Okay.
what is happening here.
Okay. So you work closely with the developers?
Yes.
Okay.
I talk with developers
This is
because they are friendly.
I mean, this is already a good start. I know teams that
Something, nothing, eh?
Yeah,
Nothing. But something say thank you, and I talk with product manager to ask, what do you think?
Yeah, okay.
What do you think this part?
I see.
So first the communication with the developers
Okay, this is
as the directory.
yeah. Okay.
It's the best thing. But
Okay.
if you can't, both.
Yeah.
As before, there is something happening here. But I think the QA should attend sessions with the process of the design too.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely.
Because designers normally design in the Figma, and here, but
Yeah.
QA has to join, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah. This is my opinion as well. I highly agree on this. Yeah. So then the question would also be for Laura, kind of the same as a UX researcher, also UX design. How important do you think it is for UX designers to understand code?
So
With-
everyone should
Yeah.
understand that.
Hard agree. Your life gets so much better, so much easier if you know at least like the basics, or at least like are not intimidated by code. Because it's something I've seen in my previous life as a UX UI designer, that as soon as you pull up code, that's like push that to the senior designers. Yeah, this is their thing. They're getting paid for this, and I see why, because on the user experience side, we are more about the vibes of the user experience, I want to say. So many people don't want to go to the code side because it's more intense. But if you can at least learn the basics, it gets so much easier to not only understand how things work on the tech side, but also communicate things to your developers. And something I've learned in every setting, I want to say, like not just UX versus a developer or testing, like things would be so much easier if people just understood each other. The communication is still like, it sounds corny, but it's still like the number one skill I would recommend everyone needs. And it is actually through software testing that I first started getting a bit of coding knowledge, because it was more a bit of an anecdote. It was a bit of an embargo because we had 4 developers and only 1 software tester on the team, and he was extremely overwhelmed. So he asked me to help him a bit and kind of just sent me the link, like, here's the testing ticket, anything you find, just write it in the comments. And I was like, okay, what do I need to do here? And it's like, just try stuff, just whatever, just anything you can do helps me here. And I was like, okay, I guess. And so I was pushed into the cold waters and just had to learn anything as I went. But I think if you have the chance to just kind of play around with it, and you also have like the safe environment where it's like anything you find is good, anything you basically can't do anything bad. Just if you break it, it's not your fault, because that's kind of also part of the testing process, like testing the limits. But I think that is actually something that helps you a lot, because not only that you're encouraged to try new things outside of what your usual user behavior would be, but also in the sense that it forces you to communicate more with your developers. Because if you keep writing, I found this and this bug, and this is what it does, this is what it is supposed to do, and here's how I made it happen, this kind of trains you into the developer lingo, I want to say. So I've noticed that it is so much harder to describe stuff if you don't know what developers call them. And most of the time we have very limited contact points, especially UX design and developers. I've learned that not in all companies, but most companies do have design handoffs, and then it's like, okay, done. Maybe you get the occasional follow-up, but you do not really co-create the design, or you don't really have regular check-ins with your developers. It's usually just, here's the Figma file, now go off, make it happen. You put it into the code blind box, and later on it's live, you get a link, and you get it as a designer, and you think like, wow, that looks nothing like my Figma file. And it's usually what you don't want as a designer. But if you understand the code, like just the basics, know how it works, how the constraints are also, then it makes sense. It just clicks, like, okay, this looks a bit different because this and this element was used on this and this CSS styling, and that's just how it kind of shuffled. But once you understand it, you also know how to remediate. So if your developer comes to you and tells you like, no, we can't change that, you can tell them, no, I know we can't change that. Here's the link to the Firefox WebMD document telling you how to do that.
I think I also think it's very important if the whole team should have a basic understanding of code. And especially what I experienced in my project is I would love for the project manager to have knowledge of code as well. And Nao already mentioned it, that she feels that communication is key to make the whole product more reliable and accessible. And this would also a question to Daniel, because of the project management position. I experienced that I, as a developer, I knew certain things already, what we could implement or what we could not implement. And I experienced it in a way that I was hindered to make progress in a way faster pace because of the communication within the team, especially between my communication to the project manager, which I have to do, which I understand, but also when the project manager does not have any clue about code. And I know that you are in a field of IT as well, so you understand basic of code or even better. So it would not be a problem working with you, I assume. But then the project manager is the only person who talks to other stakeholders or to the product owner. Is there a way to improve the communication between all of them to make things faster and more understandable to begin with when the project manager has no clue at all what I, as a developer, am talking about. To say it like this.
Then you have to explain it in a way that I can understand it in the end. Hard.
I mean, do you understand my problem, what I'm pointing out here?
Of course. I mean, for example, if you're a project man, let's say you're a project manager for 10 years in the construction and industry, and then you do IT projects. I mean, this would not work. So in my opinion, you should be familiar with the topics you deal with. Also with that, for example, you bring some experience in you do 10 years of backend development, but you have no experience in front-end development from the project management perspective right now. And then you switch to front-end, then it's also quite... I mean, it's a challenge, but it's also some new, and you have to find your own way to express yourself and align with the topics. Yes, but it depends on the case in the end. So, my opinion, if you work in project management with IT projects, then you should have a basic knowledge of the IT in general. I mean, you don't need to read the code the whole time, because that's not your job. That's a job of the developer. You also don't need an extended knowledge of testing or IT architecture. But you need, as a project manager, the ability to also talk to your developers and testers and the IT architecture, and then to collect this information and transform it into a way other stakeholders who have no clue about IT in general, and to bring them up how important some things are, and how much time does it take, and how much does it cost. Also, in my opinion, as far as I experienced in the last 6 years, it's quite important as a product manager itself to have IT knowledge, because some developers are a bit, they know what to do. So, and then, yeah, but this bug, it's so hard to implement it, and it takes so much time and so on. And then, I mean, come on. So you can't tell me that you change the word of the button, it takes you, I don't know, hours and so on. This can't be the case. And also that you have to argue that, or challenge also the developers, that it can't be the case to, I don't know, change the color of the button and it takes up 3 days. That's not possible. And therefore, it's also quite important for project managers to have a basic knowledge of the IT part in the end.
Yeah.
Can I just cut in? I've once had presented the results of a accessibility evaluation of I think it was just a one-page application actually, and I got a response like, we need an effort estimation, and it was a typo in the label of a form field. But we need an effort estimation for that one.
Yeah. I think this, I do not understand these kind of things. So this already costs us, I don't know, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I would already have fixed the bug while discussing what the bug is, how long does it take, and who is doing it. I would have already done it. And what I experienced with, maybe it was bad luck for me in the project I have been, but I experienced that the project manager tells me something like, the product owner wants this implemented. And I tell the product manager, this is not possible because of this and that. And I see, I write it down, and then the next meeting I have tomorrow with the product owner, I will tell him that this is not possible. And then it is tomorrow, and then they have the meeting, and then they tell me, okay, the product owner wants it like this, like this. Is this possible? And I can say yes or no. And 3 days are gone. And I could say to the product owner in his face, this is not possible, we can do it like this, and yes or no. Would have taken 5 minutes. Why is this not possible? Why do we have to, or do you think it still makes sense to have these way of information going through the project manager and to the product owner or other stakeholders, that this is the best way. And I was just unlucky with my project manager and the whole situation I was in.
It depends on the governance of the whole project. I mean, so I've had projects where we talked directly to the stakeholders and really the decision makers. And then it was quite easy, but it depends on the setup and the governance of the whole project, how it's set up, and which levels you have to go to, get the real decisions. And if it's the case that no, you have 3 lines between it and this strict hierarchy, then you end up in the situation you were in back in the days where you lose days in the end to get things done.
Yeah.
But not every project is built up like that. So it also depends on the customer. I mean, if you are in your company and you do it for your own, build your own product, then it's something different. But for example, if you build something for the customer and the customer says no, the project needs to be set up like that, then you face these issues.
Yeah, I see. Because we talked about effort estimation, there would be a question for Emma about recommendations. Do you have recommendations for scaling up accessibility work and particular remediation?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I think it's so dependent on the project. Like, I don't think any of us could have estimated when we were like, oh, we're just going to add an ARIA label to a button that could take like months, really. Whereas on other projects, maybe smaller projects or like newer built projects, you can be like, okay, I'm going to add an ARIA label to the design system, and it's all like sorted within a couple of hours. So it's so dependent on what kind of code quality you already have and how projects are already built. The thing I would say basically, whether you're testing yourself or whether you've had an audit and got results and are planning the remediation, is go for the things that are most critical first, and because it will affect the largest amount of users, and also try to pick things that look like low-hanging fruits. I mean, adding an ARIA label to a button looks like a low-hanging fruit, and most of the time it should be. But you hopefully have some knowledge of your project and know like how quickly certain things could be done. But yeah, the more critical of a blocker, that is what I would aim to remediate first. And then build up to like, okay, then we take the major issues and then we take the minor issues, and then so if you have to do it in stages, then I would probably go for that kind of plan to scale up.
Laura?
Yes, just to add on that, for evaluating what the critical issues are, particular to your user base, this can actually be like not for all products, I would say, but with some it's very clear, like you can determine what types of disabilities are more prevalent within your customer base. So for example, if your user demographic tends to be older, then okay, that's a given. You have usually hearing loss, vision loss, mobility, reduced mobility. All of those types of disabilities come with aging, to have it all early onset. Whereas if we're talking more sector specific, for example, in construction work, you will have more physical disabilities because of injuries, since especially big companies tend to, at least here in Europe would have noticed, I don't know about how it's around the globe, but most companies tend to reposition or rehome their own workers. So if you have a injury that ends with a disability, like you, I don't know, drive a screwdriver through your hand and can't really move it afterwards, you usually get maybe like an office position afterwards, so that you have like a desk job instead of out in the field. So in that case, you can kind of anticipate, okay, this is the customer base I'm servicing, like what might they experience as disabilities, and from that on work out which success criteria and which types of usability testing should I be doing to elevate the most critical ones.
Mm. Now, go ahead.
About the critical ones, and the mobile. The accessibility for mobile is a challenge, upcoming challenge, because we have to. Some people can't tap, or they don't have hands and can play or tap something. Then we have to switch access testing, like switch and zoom too. And I think this is what we have to improve the accessibility. And we have to dive into the mobile testing, but about the accessibility. What do you think?
I actually think, because you mentioned switch buttons, I think they are a lot more common than people realize. But personally, I've only met them within like the maker spaces, like the engineering context more, and never within web accessibility. Then it's like, okay, it gets like a small mention somewhere, but it is so multi-purpose, and especially like the low tech, like low cost tools are also what most people use, because those are the most like financially accessible ones.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I think we almost reached our last question, which would be a question for everyone who would love to answer. Besides the fact that we should know how to test for accessibility, what other skills do you think is important when working in the field of accessibility?
Coding.
I
I
think we,
always say this part is something happening here, but I write a little bit code because I don't know the full code. I can't review all the this one, and number of week code, and I think I hope the developers understand which part is wrong and how to improve. So coding is
Yeah.
yeah, I would say what we've already mentioned about communication is so important. Improving the communication between designers and developers, and even with the project managers as well. But also, like, if you're coming from an outsider perspective, like I do quite a lot of auditing as well, or I'm sometimes a consultant for other companies, that I can't just go in there and then shoot down all of their developers for doing it wrong. I have to communicate in a way that doesn't put them in a defensive mode, and like that we're working together. So definitely like good communication. And then I would also say willingness to learn, because there are so many people with there are so many different disabilities, so many people that use their devices in various different ways. And like I know some people that use screen readers, and I've learned so much from watching them use their screen reader on a daily basis and that kind of thing. But I know that there are still other people with other kinds of disabilities that I haven't come into contact with. And although I do my best to kind of try and consider them, that if I were to meet them and learn and that kind of thing, and know more about their disabilities, and that would widen my ability to then like teach other people how to make websites accessible, and also my ability to code more accessible websites as well. So yeah, like knowledge, communication, and a willingness to learn.
Yeah, these are the good ones.
I'm going to add to that. Totally agree on the communication part. I would also add like a certain degree of critical self-evaluation / humility, because if you think you know everything there is about web accessibility, you definitely don't, because I think it's definitely impossible to learn everything about, like really know everything about web accessibility. And the big issue with that is we usually tend to like focus is like one topic, we put everything into one box and call it accessibility issue, although there are different issues that apply to every type of disability. Like some of them overlap, yes, but they can be very broad. So we all put it in the same box and the same pot and just say like, yes, we will have one accessibility specialist to fix all of that and be responsible for it, but it's just not impossible for people to know that much. So I would say being very aware of your own skills and also being critical of how much you really know and how up to date you are on good practices, because they're probably, I think we can say that there's not a best practice that applies to everyone equally, but there are certain good practices that benefit the majority. And also on the communication part, it is very, very hard to communicate both confidently but self-critical. So being like, I know that this is an issue, I don't know how to fix it, but we can figure it out together. This is like the hardest challenge in accessibility, I would say.
I mean, as I mentioned before, the communication, but in my opinion, it's not only related to accessibility in general, but from the project management or from that perspective, I mean, if you don't have been in touch with most people think so disabilities, okay, yeah, this is yeah, the guy in the wheelchair or something like that, and so on. But I saw statistics from Eurostat in the European Union, where it's about that 2070. So 100 million people around are people or facing disabilities. So, and if you think about it, that in general, about the demographic situation and the people get older and so on, that there will be more people with disabilities in general. So, and also for the customer and user perspective and so on, these people will get older. Some of them will have disabilities, and therefore it's not a niche in the end what they need to face. Okay, then we don't reflect this person. We have multiple other persons we can sell our product, but it will be more and more that people will have based on their age in the end face some disabilities, and therefore also your clients will face these disabilities, and therefore it's quite important to have the applications accessible.
Yeah, thank you all for joining this Ask Us Anything about accessibility, and a huge thank you to our panelists for sharing your experiences and insights. I think it was very eye-opening to see how accessibility touches every part of the development process. I would also love to discuss my last session with you, which will be the webinar about, it's an assignment review and accessibility audit finding. When you click on the link in my slides, which I will share with you today in the Google Developer Group event page, you can find it afterwards down here, and also on my Accessibility First website under the webinar series. In here, to Ask Me Anything, and I provide you a link where you can find the assignment review, the event where you should register for, because in this event you will find my code. It's an inaccessible landing page. It's a very simple page, but you will find a few accessibility issues. And I would love for you to test this website on your own and create a small audit, maybe the one I shared with you in my first or second webinar, how you could write an audit. And you can send me your results up to 2 days before this event will happen, the review and accessibility audit findings, because then I can talk about your findings during my webinar. And of course, I will make it anonymous. I do not share any names or something, but just the findings or the way you addressed issues. And then we can discuss whether did every one of you find all the issues, and did we find the same errors, and how we approach the testing, and are there maybe advantages or disadvantages of how we approached the testing phase and did the audit. And it can also give you some tips on how you could improve an audit or improve certain areas in way of testing. And you will definitely get most out of my last session when you prepare for it and having tested the site yourself. So take the opportunity and do it. You can, if you have an account on CodePen, then you can copy my code and look at the code in debug version, because this will remove this bar over here, which then this bar already has many accessibility issues, and you do not want to find bugs which are not related to the homepage. So the debug version would be the one we are aiming for. Now you can only change between details and full page, but we want the debug, and this is you only get it when you are logged into your account and copy this code to yourself. Then there was a question about the next live event in Vienna. So there are 2 events. First one would be the Dev Fest, which is in November 15th, when I'm not mistaken. It's a Saturday, and it's at TU Vienna. It's a whole day event. And there's also from the Women Tech Makers, the event. It's a meetup. You can register via meetup on the Women Tech Makers site. Thank Laura for sharing your Dev Fest, and maybe you also have the link for the Women Tech Makers event. This is also in person. It's in the Europlaza, where Microsoft and everything is located, and the Inspired company where we will host our meetup in person, also have a stream, and we would love to meet you in person. Of course, if you are in Vienna, living here, or just making a short trip here, then please join us in these meetups or at DevFest, meet us in person. We would love to. In our case, it would be Laura and myself living in Vienna. Yes, otherwise it would be it for today. I'm very happy that you joined, that you asked your questions. I hope we could answer your questions and also give you some other perspectives and insights from how the different roles are working in their fields and in the development in the development team. Yes. Thank you for joining, and have a nice evening. Thank you to the panelists again. See you next time, and yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for having us. Thank you for the questions.